The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today in our webcast. We had a little bit of technical difficulty there, so it took us a minute to get everything all set. So just an FYI, today's session is being recorded. Now, if you're using SAP PowerDesigner and wondering what comes next, you're in the right place. So this session is all about making the switch to Erwin Data Modeler and show you just how easy, straightforward, and supported from a strategic transition that you can have. So Kevin, can you go ahead and go to the next screen? So just a little bit of background on Sandhill Consultants. At Sandhill, we're proud to be at the forefront of data management with our deep expertise in all of the data modeling solutions, as well as data cataloging and data governance. What sets us apart is our focus on delivering end-to-end practical solutions that will begin with modeling, but extend through the entire data lifecycle. We bring together our knowledge of Erwin and Quest technologies, including data governance frameworks and business glossaries, as well as data dictionaries, all to help organizations build strong, scalable foundations of trusted data. Our mission is simple: to help clients transform complexity into clarity, enabling better decisions, smoother migrations, and long-term data value. Now, if you'd like to explore more, you can certainly visit our website at sandhillconsultants.com. So Kevin, go ahead and hit the next slide. So just before we dive in, I wanted to walk you through what we'll be covering today. This session is designed to give you a clear understanding of what's happening with SAP PowerDesigner and why now is a time to consider a switch, and how Erwin Data Modeler, along with Sandhill's migration and training expertise, can help you make the transition smoothly. We'll walk you through the current state of PowerDesigner, show you what a migration looks like, including a live demo, and outline steps if you're ready to explore this further. And of course, we'll wrap up with some Q&As and answer any kind of specific questions you might have. So Jeff, I think over to you for the next key point.
Thanks, Robert. This is the latest announcement from SAP concerning PowerDesigner. Now, let me give you a little background here on PowerDesigner. PowerDesigner was originally acquired by a company called Sybase, and then Sybase was acquired by SAP. Now, when Sybase was working with databases, they needed tools to support the database because it was primarily a data management company. SAP, on the other hand, is more of an applications company, sort of an ERP company. So tools isn't exactly where they want to spend a lot of their time. So this is sort of the deprecation of PowerDesigner over time as it was acquired during the Sybase acquisition. But if you look at this last line here in this list here, it says the product's current end of mainstream maintenance is going to be December 31st, 2027. So there has been no news on anything after 2027. It's currently been sort of handed off to a company called Novalis to sort of manage its decline. But basically, PowerDesigner is eventually going to just deprecate. So this is a good time to start thinking about your migration plans. And so that's kind of the reason for this presentation today, is to get you started thinking about options for migrating off PowerDesigner. Next slide, please.
Well, and Jeff, just as we go into the migration auditing training, I think you used to work at SAP at one point, yeah?
Well, actually, I used to work for a company called PowerSoft, who originally acquired PowerDesigner for their product called PowerBuilder, and then Sybase bought PowerSoft, and so then I was acquired and started working for Sybase, and PowerDesigner was my product. So I was responsible for doing technical sales for PowerDesigner. And then when SAP bought Sybase, I was there for a while doing PowerDesigner sales, integrating PowerDesigner with some of the back-end systems at SAP, and then seeing where PowerDesigner could integrate with some of their other products like master data management and some other things like that. And so that's really where I was with SAP. Now, SAP did actually acquire a business process modeling tool called Signavio. They also acquired another tool called Lean IX for enterprise architecture. So what they really like with the tools is to have it not be on a particular platform. They don't actually want tools that run specifically on Windows or Linux or Unix or anything like that. What they want are browser-based tools. And since PowerDesigner is heavily built on Windows, it doesn't quite meet the vision of what SAP wants for its tools, because they do have a few. But unlike Quest, who is a tools company, SAP is mostly an applications company.
And Jeff, just one last point. Yeah, I know that you've got a lot of experience in SAP PowerDesigner, right? And you were the last sort of man standing at SAP before they made changes there. Can you maybe talk to the kind of enhancements through the years? Because I understand that it's even difficult to find if they actually have a product manager. But has there been any kind of material changes to the tool in the past decade?
Not really. At the last time I checked, and this is a couple of years ago, there was no official product manager for this product. So it's there, it's kind of in sustained release. So what they've been doing is basically when new versions of, let's say, Oracle or SQL Server come out, they make sure that it works with the latest version. So they'll continue to support the databases that they support now, but any new ones, like let's say if you wanted to do graph modeling or knowledge modeling or something like that, they're not going to do any of those newer kind of NoSQL type models. So they're pretty much got this thing sort of locked down. In the 16.7 release has been the release for quite a while. I forget what the patch level is, but they'll continue to issue patches so it'll work on, let's say, Windows 11 and any variations of the Windows platform. So it will be in sustained release and you will be able to use it. But if you want to do modeling into the future, do some more NoSQL type things, PowerDesigner is just not going to be there for that.
Thanks, Jeff. So Kevin, and now we can go ahead to the next slide. And so what we want to do is we wanted to start with a high-level view of a structured program that we've developed at Sandhill to support migrations from SAP PowerDesigner to Erwin Data Modeler. This isn't just a lift and shift. Our approach combines the migration, auditing, training, and data modeling best practices, which are all aligned to minimize risk and ensure long-term success of the tools that you use. Now, we've developed and designed this program specifically for PowerDesigner users, focusing on reducing disruption, improving model quality, and setting your team up with the skills they need to thrive in the environment. So, Kevin, let's go ahead to the next slide and do a little bit of a closer look at how this program would work in practice. So where Sandhill begins is we begin with a comprehensive assessment of your existing PowerDesigner models. We're going to look for identify opportunities and identify constraints and areas that may need adjusting before you go through the migration process. From there, we would then look at the training, make sure that the team knows how to leverage Erwin, because there's some things you do differently in Erwin, which we're going to explore. And we want to make sure your team is confident using the Erwin data modeling tool, not just for today, but also being part of that sustained modeling practice. Then we would execute the migration audit phase, make sure that we validate your models post-migration for accuracy, integrity, and any standards compliance. And finally, we can help embed standards and best practices, ensuring consistency, quality, and alignment with any of the client's data modeling center of excellence frameworks. whether you're managing just a handful of models or scaling across your enterprise. So with that, Jeff, I wonder if you can explain in the next slide how the PowerDesigner models fit into the Erwin architecture.
Sure. PowerDesigner has 3 levels of data modeling: conceptual, logical, and physical. Excuse me. Conceptual is primarily business, right? To set up your entities, define those entities. There's also something in the conceptual model which is called a data item. Those aren't really part of, well, they're not part of Erwin. Erwin does not have this specific model type called a conceptual model. So how that migrates is it migrates to an Erwin logical model. So there's no actual conceptual. And then all PowerDesigner logical models will also migrate to a logical model. Now on the physical side, with PowerDesigner, you could create a separate logical from physical during the modeling process if you wanted to. During the migration process, and Kevin will show you this when he does it, is you have the opportunity to have this sort of an integrated physical, logical type of model if you want. So they would migrate both those to an Erwin logical model with a physical perspective. And that's generally the way that the models will map. Now, one thing I will note here as well, if you did any of your data modeling using Barker notation or Maurice notation, those notation styles are not supported in Erwin. Erwin supports IDEF1X and it supports the James Martin IE notation. So what you would end up with, if you did IDEF1X, everything would come over the same because that's an international standard. However, Erwin's crow's foot notation is a little bit different from PowerDesigner's crow's foot notation. Some nuances. It's not a huge differentiation, but there are some symbolic differences.
And Jeff, I think we've got some mapping from SAP PowerDesigner to Erwin DM.
Yeah.
I wonder if you might just want to kind of review some of these mapping ones so that way PowerDesigner users may know what's coming and how it transitioned into Erwin DM.
Yes. So there's some things that are going to be the same, you know, like starting at the top. A model is a model. So that's just the container where all that metadata is going to get modeled. And PowerDesigner has diagrams, as does Erwin have diagrams. So those will all map the same. Business rules will be a little bit different. If you've used the business rule in PowerDesigner as a, let's say, process type model, it'll still come over, but it'll be what's called a UDP. And you'll have to decide how you want to handle the business rule as a UDP in Erwin, because there's not a one-to-one on that. Domains are exactly the same in Erwin. As a matter of fact, Erwin uses a lot more domains than PowerDesigner does. So in PowerDesigner, they're just called checks. In Erwin, they're part of the domains. Symbols, it will, during the import process, try to maintain as best it can the layout that you had, the colors you had, the size you had. I will say, you're going to have to go and look at these diagrams afterwards and make sure that they match up, but it'll do its best job to maintain that. From a description perspective, there is a field in PowerDesigner called description. In PowerDesigner, it's an RTF field, which means you could do bold, colors, underline. I'm not sure about the description field in Erwin, but I think it just might be an ASCII field. PowerDesigner has annotations, but Erwin calls them notes, so that it will, all your annotations will end up in notes. PowerDesigner has a text symbol, which is basically the same as a text block in Erwin. And this is the notation stuff that I was talking about before. Entity relationship notation from PowerDesigner becomes Erwin's version of crow's foot notation. If you've used Barker, or if you're using the French version and you want to use Maurice, the migration is to regular IE notation. Again, IDEF notation would be the same. And the user-defined properties are what I was alluding to with UDPs. PowerDesigner has something called extensions, and an extension will become a user-defined property. They come over, no metadata is lost, but you may have to figure out how you want to use the user-defined properties, because in PowerDesigner you can create a form, and on the form you can have properties. There's no concept of a form in Erwin, so you just get the properties, but you'll have to define where you want to use them. Next slide. Okay, so here is where I was talking about the data item. There's only an attribute in Erwin Data Modeler. So if you have a logical model or map it to a logical model, it's just going to be an attribute. There's no concept of a data item there. PowerDesigner has this thing called an identifier, which is simply saying it's not currently a primary key, it's not an alternate key, it's not a candidate key, it's just an identifier. And you can later on define how you want to use it, so that's why they call them identifiers. Erwin just has something called a key group. So all your identifiers, whether you've set them up to be primary, alternate, or just candidates, will go to the key group, entity, and relationships. They map one-to-one, so no issues there. PowerDesigner, when you're doing supertype, subtype, it uses the UML concept of inheritance. Erwin sticks with the standard data modeling supertype, subtype nomenclature, but they basically map the same. Inheritance link is a subtype relationship, and inheritance is the subcategory or the subtype of supertype. Next. And these are the objects. This is a pretty straightforward, especially on physical data modeling. It's mostly a one-to-one. Columns, keys, tables, references, indexes, views. There is a difference when it comes to tables. PowerDesigner doesn't actually have any specific fact, dimension, outrigger names for tables. It understands what a fact table is and a dimension table is and an outrigger table is, but we don't actually label them in PowerDesigner. There is a way that you can go ahead and set up a stereotype and it would stereotype them. But for the most part, the tables will come over with the appropriate layout for star schemas and things like that. Current DBMS is the database you're in currently, and Erwin calls it a target database. It's just, I guess, a difference in names. Check parameters. This is basically when I was talking about domains. Check parameters in PowerDesigner let you define a list of valid values, date ranges, date formats, and all the other things that you would basically assign with a domain. They're part of what's called a check parameter, and then Erwin calls them valid values. And then table spaces and are the same, and storages become segments. I think that's it on the tables. Yeah, so this is where I will hand it off to Kevin, and Kevin will show you essentially how easy it is to actually take an existing PowerDesigner model file and bring it into Erwin. A note about the PowerDesigner model files, you don't have to do anything special. You don't have to save them in any particular way. Since all PowerDesigner model files are XML files, basically, it'll read them natively right into Erwin. So take it away, Kevin.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Robert. So the latest release of Erwin is version 14.1. So what I wanted to do is go over the import of how to bring in the PowerDesigner type of file. The import bridge allows you to import metadata not only from PowerDesigner, but over 100 other various types of files, data sources, databases, ETL tools, and other modeling software. So as soon as this comes up, here we go. I could give you a little overview of the, or go over or show you what some of the specific import bridge capability that's offered. So as I said, there are about 100 different ways to bring in a specific file or database. Focusing on the SAP PowerDesigner, you'll see that Erwin supports, again, this is out of the box, this gets installed, there's no configuration part that needs to be added. It supports bringing in CDM, conceptual data model 6.x, 7.5 to 16x. We also have the logical data model, or LDM, 15x to 16, and the PowerDesigner PDM 6.1.x, as well as a range from 7.5 to 16.x. So what I have is a sample physical PDM file, and basically there's several parameters here that you could go through as far as specific properties that you want to bring in, that you could set up, and some consistency checking. The destination data model that I'm going to select as the target database is 2016, but you could also pick and choose, as Jeff had mentioned, that you could do a logical only model, physical only, or if you like a logical physical, which will be generated during the import process. So I'm just going to select finish, and it will go through the import process. You have a little status bar or window, and any type of issues that may come up during the import process, you could save it off to the status log, and you could go to that location and analyze what property or where it failed. I haven't seen any of the models that I've tested with the PowerDesigner's models. None of them have failed, so I can't say much more about what's going on here. So once it completes, as we go through
Kevin,
this.
Yeah, and Kevin, I know that we've been doing quite a lot of the PowerDesigner models, but it seems that the XML import, straightforward import, using the metadata bridges, no issues, they all seem to come over, and the audit log will just provide you any kind of discrepancies that you can check after the fact. That's what we would use as part of our migration strategy approach.
That is correct. And if you want to save this log file off, you could save it to your directly. So this is the resultant objects that are brought into Erwin. What I did was, prior to our meeting today, I created a nicely laid out version of the same data model brought in. And you'll see here that we have a logical representation of entities and attributes of the Erwin data model. And we do have the physical side of the data model as well. So now that we have this model
here for you, Kevin, just for the PowerDesigner folks out there. If you built your physical model with both the code, which is the technical name, as well as the name, when you flip to physical, it's going to display code. And when you flip to logical, it's going to display name. If you didn't do that, if you just have name and the name is the same as the code, then you're just going to see the same, whether you're in physical or logical naming representation, just so people don't get confused.
Yes. Thank you, Jeff. So some of the objects or information that was brought over. For example, we had spoke earlier about check parameters. We have the validation rules that that they've been converted to from PowerDesigner. So we have these three. One of them is a valid value. Again, it is mapped from the check parameter within PowerDesigner. We also have also had a stored procedure that came across as well. And then we also had some additional information. We had a view that came over as well. I don't want to create a new view, but I want to expand and go into the actual properties of the view itself. And you'll see that it came in as a user defined, and this is the SQL that gets generated. So that's some of the information on the physical view of the data model. So while we're here in the physical data model, we could always take a Erwin data model, and Erwin now supports a series of NoSQL target databases. So if I just open them up right here, and you'll see that if I select MongoDB, for example, and if I went through the process of converting the relational database data model into NoSQL, it would create those NoSQL collections and fields automatically during the transition over to NoSQL MongoDB as an example. Some really nice features also within the tool. Let's say I go into table properties for the SQL Server table here, and I go to the dimension, but also within the tool now, there's a lot of stuff here. You can actually go in and open up the column editor, which is a new way to actually go in and move within the navigate through the tool itself. So in prior releases of Erwin, you would have to do a close and click, and then right click and open up the column editor. It's a easier, more agile way of using the tool itself. And some of the nice properties over here to the right over here is the property panes, which gives you a sort of a high level or overview of specific objects in the model itself. This is at the highest level is the model, but if I select, for example, a table here, I'll have the information regarding the table. And if I go into a primary key employee, it will also give you the information regarding that. So you could do that for different objects, say for relationships as well. And you could go into an object count of all the tables, columns, and indexes within the tool itself. It gives you a nice little graph of or style of all those objects that are in this particular data model that was transformed into Erwin Data Modeler. So that was part of the ease of how to actually go in and bring into and integrate the PowerDesigner data model into Erwin itself. Let me just go back into the slides. And just have a little more discussion about, just to let you know that Erwin now supports the ability to reverse engineer, forward engineer cloud databases. These are the supported databases that Erwin supports. And in addition, Erwin, a couple of releases ago, added Git integration into a Git repository. These are the source repositories that are supported: the GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, and Azure DevOps. And the way the Git works is you would take a marked data model and use that data model and connect to the Git repository and take that repository, the data model itself, and forward engineer the SQL or script Alta scripts SQL to the Git repository, and that way there could be some collaboration on the DevOps team as far as whether or not to implement it in for example, a database or source code. And with that, I'm going to move to the next slide, and we'll have a little discussion on the limitations of this process.
And I think, Jeff, what we wanted to do was we wanted to pull you back in. Can you maybe go through some of the limitations? You know, I mean, it's an easy process, but things to watch out for rather than limitations, things to watch out for. And you may be on mute, Jeff.
Sorry, helps to come off of mute. Actually, this is pretty good because I got two questions in the chat here that I would like to address. First question was about PowerDesigner glossary. So PowerDesigner's had glossary for years and years and years. And to use the PowerDesigner glossary, you need to have the repository installed. And you can drive the glossary terms into the glossary via the repository. It is true that Erwin also now has a glossary feature in it. It's a new one. I think Kevin just came out recently. There is no, as far as I know, no interchange to get PowerDesigner glossary into an Erwin glossary via let's say an import process of a model, because it's just not stored in the model. However, in PowerDesigner, you do have the ability to export the entire glossary via a CSV file. And I'm not sure, but maybe we can look into this later, Kevin. I think you're probably able to import that glossary into an Erwin glossary. I think it's in the MART that you store the glossary.
That is correct. That is
what
correct.
You're going to lose is in PowerDesigner, you have those traceability links. So I can look for a glossary term and I can tell you what data model objects relate to those terms. Those you will lose. So you'll have to reconnect those kinds of things up. The other one is more of a general question here, in that PowerDesigner is a pretty open modeling tool. That is, you can write all kinds of custom code. You can create custom model checks. You can even create your own custom model type. So that extensibility that PowerDesigner has, it's not as extensible as it is in Erwin. Erwin does have scripting capabilities and you can build scripts, but the entire meta model is exposed for PowerDesigner. So maybe as they go into the future, that might change. But right now, you will be limited to some things that Erwin can do that you used to be able to do in PowerDesigner, but you can't do them in Erwin. And those will be on a case-by-case basis. Okay, let's take a look at the points we have here as far as metadata differences. As far as data modeling goes, it's been around for a long time. So a lot of the metadata tags they match up pretty well. That is, a table is a table, an entity is an entity, an attribute is an attribute, a relationship is a relationship. So those things don't really have any issues. The things you do have to think about is, if I use PowerDesigner and I extended PowerDesigner and I created a lot of extensions, a lot of customizations, you're going to have to think about just exactly what's going to come over into Erwin. As far as version compatibility, as Kevin showed you, this thing goes all the way back to version 6, although most people are at either version 7 or higher. So any older version of PowerDesigner that you have should go through without any issues. Custom extensions I kind of touched on already. These are the things you want to look at. And model complexity. Now with PowerDesigner, when you build models in PowerDesigner, you have the ability to do model generations. So you can generate from one logical multiple physicals, or you can generate multiple logicals, and then those logicals can generate multiple physicals. You have to think about how much of that you're going to have to reconnect once you get into Erwin, because that structure is not kept. All the model artifacts are there, but any kind of traceability stuff will probably have to be reconnected in Erwin's Mart. One of the other things that you need to think about is what models do we actually need to convert? Sometimes it's just easier, especially with physical models, to say, okay, this model is really out of date. It's probably easier for me to go into Erwin, connect to that physical database, reverse engineer it into a physical model, and now I have a model that's current. So you can go through your models, decide exactly what models you might want to bring over. So models that you've done a lot of work on creating, definitions inside of, naming standards, those kinds of things, those are ones you're probably going to want to migrate. But all those intermediate models that were either scratch models or of a physical database that they're woefully out of date, simply just reverse engineer new models from Erwin, and then you don't have to go through any kind of import process. So that's my general take on the migration process.
Thanks, Jeff. And Kevin, can you go ahead next one, the post import? Sure. So this would be more of just a high level view, Jeff, of what one should look for once the model has been imported. Did you just want to quickly review that for the folks?
Sure. Now, when you watched Kevin do the import process, you saw that a log was generated. If there are any, let's call them inconsistencies or issues, they will show up in that log. But for the most part, the migration process is pretty simple. In PowerDesigner, your naming standards file is just a CSV file, so you can take that CSV file and then you can bring it over into Erwin. Erwin has a special file type that it uses for naming standards, but you should be able to convert that CSV file into a file that Erwin can use, so you can keep your naming standards that you built in PowerDesigner and just move them over into Erwin. Constraints and indexes, for the most part, I haven't seen any issues with primary and foreign keys and indexes. They've all come through pretty well. So I have noticed there are some things with the views. You might want to make sure and check the view logic after a view comes over, just to make sure that SQL it came in correctly, because when it imports a view and it imports the SQL statement for the view, what usually it's looking for is a correctly nested code that that a developer could read. If you wrote your entire code on one long string and you have like little commas in there, it might not know what to do. So you might want to just double check that after the import process, just to make sure you got everything correct here. But for the most part, PowerDesigner's data types are the same as Erwin's data types, because the generic data types as far as texts and numbers are the same, but you can double check. And obviously on the physical side, PowerDesigner supports SQL Server the same way that Erwin supports it, maybe give or take a little. differences as far as objects goes. Like for instance, Kevin did show you that in PowerDesigner, you're able to actually reverse engineer stored procedures and triggers into the model and then relate that stored procedure to an object. So it does bring the objects in, but you might have to, work with it a little bit to make sure that it's correct in what came over, because that's sort of a non-standard object.
Thanks, Jeff. Kevin, just on the, we had some questions. Obviously, Jeff's addressed some of the questions, but if you go to the next slide, there were a few more questions that we wanted to make sure they were addressed. I think, Jeff, we've already addressed, you just talked about naming conventions, how they're handled in PowerDesigner going into Erwin. We talked about right at the beginning, the logical model transition to Erwin DM. I wonder maybe if there's, a couple of pitfalls that that one might want to pay attention to as we go through this. What are some of the common pitfalls that you've seen come up on these migrations?
From the technical standpoint, the migrations, there might be some cleanups. Like in the way that Erwin handles something called a subject area, and the way that PowerDesigner handles diagrams and something called packages. That's where you can get yourself tripped up, because PowerDesigner's concept of packages can have sub-packages, and those packages can also have sub-packages, which means from PowerDesigner's perspective of sub-modeling, you can go a lot deeper. In Erwin, you can only have one subject area, but you can't have a subject area inside of a subject area. The other thing in PowerDesigner is the concept of something called an area. An area lets you build an ontology in your models so that you can say, okay, this group of information at the conceptual or logical level belongs in, let's say, logistics, or people and personnel, or products and services. So you can create that kind of ontology, but that ontology will not come over into Erwin when you do the migration. So some of those higher level data architecture type things, you're going to have to figure out a different way to look at it in Erwin. So there are some functionalities that they just don't translate. So you're going to have to take a look at that. The other thing that you need to think about in this is that there is some training that's going to need to happen, because the way that you use PowerDesigner is not the same way that you use Erwin. Erwin supports this concept of creating a logical and a physical pair and just being able to flip between the two. PowerDesigner tells you that if your logical structure and your physical structure are completely different, then you should have a separate logical model. So how Erwin deals with these kinds of things might require a little bit of training. As far as DBMS specific features, PowerDesigner does reverse engineer more objects than does Erwin, but the objects that Erwin does support are ones that 99.9% of the people use all the time. Like PowerDesigner can reverse engineer permissions out of SQL Server, and it will host it in the model, but I don't run into too many people doing, let's say, access management through a data model. It's usually done through something else, but there is some differences there. Reports in PowerDesigner do not migrate into Erwin. So if you have list reports or things like that, what I would do with those is I would just generate those out either as the Word documents or Excel files, so that you actually have hard copies of them. And then you can figure out how you might want to bring those into Erwin. It might be a manual process there. You have to populate the report, but if you push them out either as tabular Excel for the list reports, or for the nested reports, you can produce them out as Word documents. PowerDesigner does have the ability to generate a report as a website. You might want to push those out as the websites as well, because Erwin, as far as I know, does not support a report being a click-through website.
Thanks, Jeff. Kevin, you can go ahead and bring up that the kind of most important last slide of the deck, because we've tried to be as plain as we can. SAP's PowerDesigner's future is uncertain, and every organization is going to have to rely on the fact that they're going to face two choices. They're either going to have to figure out some kind of patch or workaround and accept the increased risk. I mean, we had one of the questions there was that, PowerDesigner's got all these great features. Well, these great features are not going to be around much longer. I mean, we can't spell it out any plainer. So, you can patch around and hope for the best, or you can take a proactive approach to adopting a modern, supported, scalable platform with Erwin DM. The real question we have for you is, what's your plan? How do you plan to enable this? We've shown you, the tools. We've shown you the roadmap. We've shown you how you can actually migrate and how that migration can be pretty straightforward and pretty easy for people to use. Here at Santel, we're helping organizations of every size make the move with confidence from the initial assessment to the training that Jeff mentioned, and of course, full scale migration. So whether you're just starting to explore these options or you're looking at planning your transition, we're here to guide you. Your models, your time, our expertise. There's an email on the screen here. We will send a link out to this recording, but you can contact us at info@santelconsultants.com, and we can schedule a one-on-one consultation. No pressure, just to review where you're at and see how you can make a switch. And with that, Jeff, I'd like to thank you for your experience in PowerDesigner that you brought with us over to Santel. Kevin, thank you very much indeed for explaining, the latest updates, the roadmap, and the solid tool that Erwin is and will be in the future. And of course, you're listening to Robert Lutton, Vice President, Santel Consultant. So I run the team. So with this and with our Quest partner, we'd like to thank you all for attending, and we will send this out. We've answered the questions that were posted in the chat feature there, so we just look forward to hearing from you in the near future. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.